was okay going from nothing to everything to nothing, but then having someone stand on the back of my head and keep me underwater.
When you think of Dave Mustaine, you think of razor-sharp riffs, high-voltage performances, and a no-compromise attitude that helped define thrash metal. But what you might not know is that the Megadeth frontman had zero patience for the bands he felt didn't meet his standards.
My God, Lars, you guys woke me up and said, you know what, you're out. And I asked you, what, no warning? I said, no second chance? And you guys said, no, go.
And we're not talking about small-time acts. Mustaine has taken harsh words at some of the most iconic names in metal history. And why did Mustaine feel this way? Let's dive into his surprising list. Slayer. Slayer is one of the most fearsome bands ever to emerge from the American metal scene. Formed in 1981 by Kerry King and Jeff Hanneman, Slayer quickly carved out a reputation for extreme speed, blistering aggression, and unapologetically dark themes. Their 1986 album Rain and Blood is often cited as one of the heaviest and most influential metal records of all time. But more than just their sound, Slayer's image became iconic. The pentagrams, the inverted crosses, the war and death-obsessed lyrics often leaving fans and critics wondering, was this just shock value or something deeper? By the late 1990s, Dave Mustaine's journey had taken a sharp personal turn. After years of struggles with addiction, he had become a born-again Christian, and that transformation brought a new sense of moral purpose. "I don't want to play with satanic bands," Mustaine said during a 2004 interview, explaining why Megadeth's touring choices had become more selective. Though he never outright denied Slayer's musical prowess, their imagery and lyrical content had become a sticking point. The tension had existed under the surface for years. Early on, Slayer and Megadeth were allies, sharing stages, pushing the boundaries of thrash together. But as time went on, Mustaine's personal convictions made it harder for him to reconcile Megadeth's path with Slayer's unapologetic darkness. Slayer reveled in chaos. Their songs were drenched in rebellion, often deliberately pushing past societal norms just to see what would happen. Mustaine, however, after his conversion, began seeing music as a source for discipline and message. Where Slayer wanted to burn the system down, Megadeth wanted to critique it, challenge it, even warn against it. Musically, the bands were equals, both masters of speed and precision, but their philosophies were drifting apart. The 2009 Canadian Carnage Tour is one of the most infamous examples. Backstage, Mustaine reportedly clashed with Slayer's team over stage props. According to insiders, Mustaine asked that Slayer's inverted crosses and satanic symbols be removed or hidden during Megadeth's set. Despite the tensions, Mustaine has often praised Slayer's music. In a 2013 interview, he said, "Slayer is Slayer. You can't touch them when it comes to sheer aggression." But to Mustaine, it was never just about the music. It was about meaning and what you stood for. Fans today look back on Slayer and Megadeth as two twin engines of thrash's golden era, forever linked by sound, but divided by worldview. But while the Slayer rift was philosophical, the next feud on our list cuts far deeper. A story of personal betrayal, bitterness, and one of the longest-running rivalries in rock. Metallica. If you know even a little about metal history, you know this story. Metallica, one of the biggest rock bands on the planet, started in 1981 with Lars Ulrich and James Hetfield. By 1982, they'd recruited a fierce young guitarist named Dave Mustaine. His aggressive style, songwriting input, and wild energy helped shape Metallica's early sound, particularly on early demos like No Life Till Leather. But then came the blow. In 1983, just days before recording their debut album, Kill 'Em All, Ulrich and Hetfield fired Mustaine. Reasons? His violent behavior, heavy drinking, and constant tension within the band. They put him on a Greyhound bus back to California without even letting him record. The result? A bitter grudge that would last decades. "They didn't even give me a chance," Mustaine later recalled, his voice tight with anger. "They just kicked me out, put me on a bus, and that was it." For Mustaine, the firing wasn't just a professional setback, it was a personal wound. While Metallica was filling stadiums and crossing over to mainstream audiences, Mustaine was fighting to build his own empire with Megadeth. And though Megadeth achieved massive success, Mustaine often felt they were unfairly cast as second place. While Metallica softened over time, experimenting with ballads, symphonic arrangements, and mainstream production, Mustaine doubled down on technical thrash and political ferocity. He framed Megadeth as the band for purists. For those who wanted real metal, the resentment surfaced in countless interviews over the years. Mustaine would often swing between jealousy and reluctant admiration. In the early 2000s, when asked about Metallica's Black Album success, he sighed, "They became what I wanted Megadeth to be." Today, the Megadeth-Metallica rivalry remains one of rock's most enduring feuds. It fueled some of Megadeth's greatest work, driving Mustaine to prove himself again and again. And though the bitterness has softened with time, you can still hear the edge in Mustaine's voice when he talks about the band that fired him all those years ago. But if Metallica was a rivalry born of personal betrayal, the next band on our list annoyed Mustaine for a very different reason. They represented everything about the scene that Mustaine despised. Rat. Emerging from the neon-lit streets of Los Angeles in the early 1980s, Rat was one of the crown jewels of the glam metal explosion. They weren't just part of the scene, they defined it. With their slick, radio-ready hits like Round and Round, Lay It Down, and Wanted Man, they stormed MTV, magazine covers, and arena stages. But Rat wasn't just about the music. Their whole persona screamed excess. Big hair, leather pants, eyeliner, polished guitars, and a party-at-all-costs vibe. They were emblematic of an era when rock was just as much about image as sound, maybe more. And that's exactly where the friction with Mustaine began. That wasn't metal, that was a fashion show, Mustaine snapped in a late 90s radio interview. For Mustaine, Rat represented the commercialization of metal, while thrash bands like Megadeth were pushing boundaries with technicality, aggression, and political fury. Glam bands like Rat were making pop-leaning anthems designed for radio and MTV. Mustaine didn't just see Rat as another genre, he saw them as the enemy. While Megadeth was writing songs like Peace Sells, a snarling, politically charged anthem questioning media, government, and war, Rat was singing about girls, fast cars, and nightlife. To Mustaine, glam metal was a betrayal of what heavy music was supposed to stand for: anger, rebellion, and mastery. For Mustaine, though, it was a competition for the soul of metal. Despite Mustaine's disdain, Rat carved out their own corner of rock history. They may not have had the technical chops or political edge of thrash bands, but they helped define an era of glam rock excess that millions of fans still celebrate today. But if Mustaine's beef with Rat was a battle over image and sound, the next feud on our list was about something deeper, a generational clash that Mustaine saw as the death of real metal. Korn. Flash forward to the mid-1990s, and metal had entered a new phase. Grunge had dethroned glam, and in the rubble, a new sound emerged: nu metal. Korn, hailing from Bakersfield, California, became one of the most influential bands of this new wave, blending down-tuned guitars, hip-hop-inspired grooves, slap bass, and raw, confessional lyrics about trauma and emotional pain. Korn's music connected with a generation of disaffected teens. But to Mustaine, Korn represented everything he hated about the evolution of metal. For him, Korn and their peers weren't pushing musical boundaries, they were simplifying them. Mustaine saw nu metal's groove-heavy approach as a step backward, a dilution of the technical mastery that thrash had worked so hard to build. It wasn't just the sound, it was the attitude. Korn's songs were vulnerable and emotional. Megadeth's songs were outwardly aggressive. Mustaine couldn't relate to Korn's confessional lyrics, and he didn't want to. Where Korn embraced heavy simplicity, chugging riffs, stomping rhythms, primal screams, Megadeth remained committed to complexity, rapid-fire solos, time changes, and meticulous arrangements. Mustaine once summarized it bluntly, "I could play those riffs in my sleep, but why would I?" At a major European festival in the early 2000s, Korn and Megadeth were booked on the same lineup. According to insiders, Mustaine was visibly annoyed at sharing the bill. He reportedly remarked backstage, "This is what metal has come to? Jesus Christ." Despite Mustaine's criticism, Korn reshaped heavy music, opening doors for a wave of new bands and helping nu metal dominate the late 90s and early 2000s. Mustaine, for his part, stayed firmly in his lane, refusing to budge stylistically. Looking back, even Mustaine had to admit Korn's influence. "They had their moment," he conceded in a later interview, "but it's not my thing." And maybe that's the point. Korn and Megadeth were playing entirely different games, one about emotion, the other about technique. And now, we arrive at the top of the list, the ultimate Mustaine nemesis. Not just a musical rivalry, not just a generational split, but a deep, fiery disdain for a band that Mustaine saw as the embodiment of everything wrong with rock and roll. Mötley Crüe. If Rat was a symbol of glam's commercial side, Mötley Crüe was its wild, destructive heart. Formed in Los Angeles in 1981, Mötley Crüe combined glam theatrics with punk energy and a notorious appetite for debauchery. Albums like Shout at the Devil, Theater of Pain, and Girls, Girls, Girls made them MTV darlings and tabloid legends. But for Mustaine, Mötley Crüe wasn't just another glam band. They were the worst of glam. They were everything wrong with rock, Mustaine once ranted. Style over substance, excess over art. While Mustaine was battling his own addictions in the 80s, he resented the Crüe's unapologetic celebration of theirs. Even at his wildest, Mustaine believed in the craft of music, the discipline, the work, the technical mastery. To him, Mötley Crüe wasn't about musicianship, it was about spectacle. Mötley Crüe thrived on chaos. Their music was loud, fun, and sleazy. Megadeth, on the other hand, thrived on control. Mustaine was obsessed with precision, speed, and making a statement. One band wanted to party until the sun came up. The other wanted to write songs that would rip your face off and make you think. There's a legendary story from a backstage encounter in the late 80s. According to crew members, Mustaine and Nikki Sixx had a heated argument at an after-party. Mustaine allegedly stormed out, muttering, "I'll bury those clowns with my guitar." Sixx later wrote in his memoir, "Mustaine was always intense. Like, dude, relax. It's rock and roll." For Mustaine, though, it wasn't just rock and roll. It was a mission. And Mötley Crüe, in his eyes, made a mockery of it. Today, both bands are iconic, but for entirely different reasons. Mötley Crüe remains a symbol of 80s excess, immortalized by Netflix biopics and reunion tours. Megadeth stands as one of thrash's most respected, uncompromising forces. Even now, when asked about the Crüe, Mustaine rarely holds back. "They're part of rock history, sure," he once said, "but not part of my history." Which feud surprised you? Were you expecting more? Did we leave out a Mustaine rivalry you think should have made the cut? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe for further updates.